1986, a Mitsubishi engineer signed off on a transfer case for a 7-seat family van, with the same low-range gearing used in vehicles crossing the Sahara. That opened a door. Over the next 2 decades, engineers at Toyota, Nissan, Volkswagen, Mazda, and Iveco walked through it, fitting minivans with hardware they had no business carrying, locking differentials, portal axles, rally drivetrains. What they built was sold quietly and discontinued quietly. These are the 10 most overbuilt 4x4 minivans ever put into production. The one at number 1 started all of it. Number 10, Nissan Prairie, 1982 to 1998. In 1982, Nissan launched a minivan with no B-pillar, sliding doors on both sides, and seats that folded into configurations no family hauler had attempted before. It was called the Prairie, and it was 2 years ahead of the Dodge Caravan, 2 years ahead of everything America would eventually decide it wanted in a family van. Then Nissan tried to add 4-wheel drive to it, and the body shell broke. The Prairie was launched in 1982 as a genuinely radical idea, a pillarless sliding door minivan with flexible seating before anyone else had thought to combine those things. It was Japan's answer to the family hauler, and it arrived 2 full years before the Dodge Caravan even existed. But when Nissan's engineers tried to add 4-wheel drive to the original Prairie, they ran into a problem. The body shell was too weak. The torsional rigidity simply was not there to handle the forces a 4-wheel drive drivetrain would generate. The response from Nissan's engineering team is the overbuilt moment. Rather than scrapping the idea or finding a workaround, they rebuilt the entire platform. The original Sunny-based chassis was abandoned. A fundamentally stiffer, heavier structure was engineered from the ground up, specifically to make 4-wheel drive viable. The 4-wheel drive Prairie that finally appeared in September 1985 used a 2.0-liter engine, the rear axle from the Nissan Sunny 4-wheel drive, and a completely redesigned body that had been structurally reinforced at every point that mattered. Nissan spent years rethinking the Prairie's architecture just to put 4-wheel drive into a family van. Not for a military contract, not for a fleet order, for a people mover. When the second generation arrived in 1988, the overbuilding went further. The chassis was upgraded again, this time to the larger Nissan Bluebird platform, and the second generation Prairie 4-wheel drive introduced a Taser. That is the Advanced Total Traction Engineering System for all-terrain, the same full-time 4-wheel drive technology Nissan was developing for its performance cars. It distributed torque automatically based on traction conditions on a minivan. In 1988, the Prairie never sold in massive numbers. It was too unconventional, too Japanese for export markets that wanted something closer to a caravan. But inside that boxy, practical body was a drivetrain story that most dedicated 4x4s of the same era could not match. Would you rather have a Prairie 4-wheel drive or a first-gen Dodge Caravan for a Canadian winter? Think carefully. Number 9. Mitsubishi Chariot, 1983 to 2003. Before we get to the 2 vehicles everyone expects at the top of this list, there is something that needs to be said about a van that Mitsubishi built for 20 years, and the world largely ignored. It had the same parent company as the Delica, the same engineering philosophy. At one point, it had the same engine as the Lancer Evolution, and almost nobody outside of Japan has ever heard of it. This is the Mitsubishi Chariot, and the injustice starts in 1983. The Chariot launched in 1983 as a compact MPV, Japan's answer to the emerging people carrier segment, before the Dodge Caravan had been revealed to the world. It seated 7 passengers in a practical, forward-thinking body. And from June 1984, Mitsubishi offered a 4-wheel drive version, a proper system with permanent 4-wheel drive, and an intake manifold vacuum actuator that added rear axle drive without encroaching on the passenger cabin. The engineering was compact, unobtrusive, and effective. It worked so well that Mitsubishi carried the principle forward into every subsequent generation. The second-generation Chariot arrived in 1991. Mitsubishi gave it the 4G63 engine. For those unfamiliar with that designation, it is the same engine that powered the Lancer Evolution. In a small number of second-generation Chariots, Mitsubishi took that engine, detuned it to 227 horsepower, in manual form, mated it to the four-wheel drive system, and called it the Resort Runner GT. Approximately 2,415 were produced between April 1995 and August 1997. A 227 horsepower four-wheel drive, turbocharged 7-seat minivan, produced in 1995 by a manufacturer that had won the Dakar Rally. It should not exist, it does. The third-generation Chariot Grandis, introduced in 1997, moved to monocoque construction using Mitsubishi's Rise safety body. The same engineering platform applied to the Pajero of the same era. The four-wheel drive variant used the 4G64 engine with Mitsubishi's GDI direct injection technology. A V6 option producing 215 horsepower was available in 2WD form. The Chariot was built for 20 years. It competed quietly, did everything the Delica did at a lower price point, and was replaced in 2003. It was never exported to North America in its most capable four-wheel drive forms. Most people outside of Japan have never heard of it. The Resort Runner GT in particular, 2,415 units, turbocharged, all-wheel drive, 7 seats, rally-derived drivetrain, remains one of the most overlooked performance vehicles of the 1990s, regardless of category. Not just overlooked as a minivan. Overlooked entirely. The people who know about it tend to be the people who own one. Mitsubishi built a 227 horsepower four-wheel drive, 7-seat minivan in 1995. Why does nobody talk about this? Number 8. Toyota MasterAce Surf, 1982 to 1992. Toyota gave this van a name that sounds like it belongs on a surfboard. The MasterAce Surf. And before you write that off as 1980s Japanese marketing, understand what Toyota actually meant by it. Surf, as in, this vehicle goes where other vans do not follow. The MasterAce Surf arrived in November 1982 as the upscale sibling of the Town Ace, Toyota's mid-range commercial van. Mechanically identical underneath, the MasterAce was differentiated by rectangular quad headlamps, large polyurethane bumpers, and an interior that came loaded with options no one expected in a van. A premium audio system, a refrigerator with ice maker, dual moonroof panels, and a Catalina trim package that included a removable loft bed. Toyota built a camping vehicle inside a van body and sold it as a minivan. The four-wheel drive version arrived in December 1985, carrying the CR30 body code. The drivetrain under the MasterAce Surf four-wheel drive was not derived from passenger car components. It came directly from Toyota's truck division. The same architecture that underpinned the Hilux pickup and the early Land Cruiser derivatives, adapted and fitted into a forward control minivan body. 2-speed transfer case with high and low range. Turbodiesel engine option. Locking front hubs. The front suspension used a double wishbone and torsion bar design, the same configuration Toyota used in its commercial truck line. The rear suspension was a 4-link coil-rigid setup, the first time that arrangement had appeared in a Japanese cab-over-engine wagon. Toyota was not adapting car components for a van. It was adapting truck components. That distinction matters. A car-derived four-wheel drive system is built for occasional use, light terrain, and the occasional snow-covered driveway. A truck-derived system is built for load, sustained low-speed torque, and terrain that removes the concept of a road entirely. The MasterAce Surf had the second kind, in a body with rotating captain's chairs and ambient ceiling lighting. Toyota was fitting the same fundamental four-wheel drive hardware used in vehicles crossing the Dakar to a van where the second-row seats swiveled into conversation configurations and the ceiling panels lit up with ambient lighting. The MasterAce Surf was replaced in 1992 when Toyota launched the Previa. The replacement was more advanced, more powerful, and sold in far greater numbers. But the replacement did not have low-range four-wheel drive. The MasterAce Surf did. And in that gap between what was discontinued and what replaced it, you can see exactly how much engineering Toyota was willing to abandon in the name of progress. The MasterAce Surf had truck four-wheel drive and a factory ice maker. Toyota replaced it with a van that had neither. Number 7. Nissan Largo, 1993 to 1999. Japan in the 1990s had a specific kind of confidence, the kind that produces a 7-seat luxury minivan with climate control, a panoramic glass roof, navigation, captain's chairs. And then, almost as an afterthought, adds a turbocharged engine and a factory four-wheel drive system underneath all of it. Nissan called it the Largo. America never heard of it. It arrived in 1993. 7 or 8-seat configurations, engine mounted under the front seats, 2.4-litre KA24D e-petrol, producing 145 horsepower, or a 2.0-litre turbodiesel, producing around 100 horsepower. Rear-wheel drive as standard, and four-wheel drive as a factory option across multiple trim levels, including the RXG, SXG, and Highway Star packages. The overbuilt argument for the Largo is not the drivetrain alone. It is the combination of what that drivetrain was paired with. Nissan offered the Largo four-wheel drive in the Highway Star trim with climate control, navigation, a glass panoramic roof, power everything, and the kind of seating configurations more commonly found in Japanese luxury saloons than in any vehicle that also had a proper four-wheel drive system. The second and third rows could be repositioned into face-to-face lounge configurations while parked. The overhead console carried individual air vents for rear passengers. Every trim surface matched. Nissan had built the interior of a first-class cabin and bolted a four-wheel drive transfer case underneath it. The 1999 Highway Star GT4 added a turbocharged engine. In a luxury 7-seat four-wheel drive minivan. Nissan's Autech division handled the performance tuning, the same division responsible for adding sporting intent to Nissan's most capable road cars. The GT4 designation was not decorative. It was a statement that a 7-seat minivan had earned the right to carry a performance badge. The Largo four-wheel drive was simultaneously a premium people carrier and a properly equipped all-terrain vehicle. It was never exported to North America. The audience for a 7-seat turbocharged four-wheel drive luxury minivan apparently did not exist outside Japan in the 1990s. Given what the American market was buying at the time, front-wheel drive caravans with no aspirations beyond the school parking lot, it is not difficult to understand why. But look at the Largo from the other direction. A vehicle that covered mountain roads in winter, carried 7 people in genuine luxury, and could be ordered with a turbocharged engine tuned by a performance division. No manufacturer anywhere in the world was building anything like it. They still are not. Turbocharged engine, four-wheel drive, 7 seats, climate control. Nissan built this in 1999, and America never got it. Whose fault is that? Number 6. Mazda Bongo Friendee, 1995 to 2005. Some manufacturers build adventure vehicles. Some build family vans. Mazda, in 1995, decided those were the same thing, and built both at once, in a single vehicle, with a name that sounds like a summer camp activity. The Bongo Friendee. Say it out loud. Now consider that underneath the name sat a 2.5-litre turbodiesel, a factory four-wheel drive system, a 2-speed transfer case, fold flat seats that turned the interior into a sleeping platform, and an electrically operated pop-up roof. Standard. The Friendee arrived in June 1995 on the SG platform, 8 seats as standard. The auto-free top, an electrically operated elevating roof that raised to create additional headroom inside or a separate sleeping area above the cabin, Screened from the interior with its own curtains and ventilated by its own windows. Full flat seats throughout. Some variants left the factory with a pull-out kitchen unit built into the rear. Mazda was selling a factory campervan as a standard minivan and making no apologies for it. The drivetrain matched the ambition. The 2.5-litre WLT turbodiesel was the engine most buyers wanted, a workhorse unit with enough low-end torque to move the Friendee's considerable bulk with authority. Four-wheel drive on the SGL5 variant, a 2.5-litre V6 petrol option for those who wanted more power. Two-speed transfer case with high and low range on the diesel variants. The WLT engine shared its architecture with the unit fitted to the Ford Ranger and Mazda B-Series trucks in the same era. Light commercial diesel hardware, sitting beneath a van that could sleep 4 adults under its elevated roof. What the Friendee represented was a specific philosophy that Mazda held for exactly 1 generation and then abandoned. The idea that a vehicle could be fully equipped for outdoor living without any compromise to its daily usability. 8 seats on Monday, sleeping platform for 4 on Friday, 4-wheel drive across the terrain in between. The auto freetop operated electrically in seconds. Mazda had engineered the transition from people carrier to expedition base camp down to a matter of seconds. The Friendee was never officially sold in the United States. The UK and Australia received significant numbers through Japanese imports, and in both markets it developed a devoted following among overlanders and van converters who recognized what it actually was: a factory adventure vehicle disguised as a family MPV. The best examples from the 1995 to 1999 production run now command serious money. Clean diesel 4-wheel drive. Auto freetop examples are among the most sought-after Japanese imports of their generation. Factory pop-up roof, turbo diesel, 4-wheel drive, built-in kitchen. Why did no one buy this new? Number 5. Iveco Daily, 1984 to present. At number 5, we leave Japan entirely. Because while Japanese engineers were hiding 4-wheel drive systems under luxury trim and fold-flat seats, an Italian manufacturer was asking a completely different question. Not how do we make a family van capable, but how do we make a van that operates where roads stop existing, and still call it a van? The answer was portal axles. Portal axles are not a minivan feature. They are the engineering choice of vehicles that need to combine maximum ground clearance with a low vehicle center of gravity. The same hardware found on the Unimog, the Pinzgauer, and various military platforms that needed to operate where roads did not exist. The portal axle places the wheel hub lower than the axle centerline, using a gear reduction at each wheel hub. The result is exceptional ground clearance without raising the entire vehicle's center of gravity to an unstable height. On a military carrier, that makes tactical sense. On a van designed for European commercial fleets, it is engineering overkill of the highest order. The Iveco Daily 4x4 has been available since 1984, and it has never stopped being available. Selectable 4-wheel drive with low range. Differential locks, front, center, and rear, on the higher specification variants. A diesel engine with the kind of torque curve suited to heavy terrain rather than urban delivery routes. Ground clearance that exceeds most dedicated off-road SUVs sold in the same period. The payload capacity remained intact. This was not a lifestyle conversion. The same vehicle that carried the portal axles could also carry a ton of freight. Iveco had built capability and utility into the same platform without trading one for the other. Emergency services across Europe adopted it. Mountain rescue teams in Austria and Switzerland put it to work where transporters and sprinters could not follow. The Italian military has operated variants of it for decades, and throughout all of that, Iveco continued selling it as a van with portal axles and 3 locking differentials. The Daily 4x4 was never positioned as a minivan in the passenger sense, but it established the benchmark for what van-bodied engineering can achieve when someone refuses to treat ground clearance as an afterthought. It is still being built, still being sold new, still being put to work by mountain rescue services and military operators who have tried everything else and keep coming back to it. Every other vehicle on this list was built within constraints. The Iveco Daily 4x4 was built without them. 3 locking differentials on a van. Is this engineering genius, or is Iveco just showing off? Number 4. Volkswagen T4 Syncro, 1993 to 2004. In 1999, a team from Volkswagen drove a T4 multivan Syncro from Alaska to the southern tip of South America, the full Pan-American highway. 22,880 kilometers, earthquake damage in Mexico, civil unrest in Colombia, 15 days, 14 hours, and 6 minutes. Guinness World Records confirmed it. The van finished. The road did not stop it. That is the T4 Syncro's CV. What produced it goes back further than 1999. The T4 Syncro launched in 1993 and brought that drivetrain heritage into Volkswagen's most modern van platform. The T4 was itself a significant departure, the first VW transporter with a front-mounted water-cooled engine, redesigned from the ground up after the rear-engined T3. The Syncro variant added permanent all-wheel drive via viscous coupling, with available mechanical rear differential lock on higher specification models. Engine options ran from a 2.4-litre diesel through to the 2.5 TDI 5-cylinder. The viscous coupling operated without driver input. Torque was distributed automatically between front and rear axles depending on traction conditions. In normal use on dry roads, the system behaved like a conventional vehicle. The moment traction changed, it responded without the driver having to think about it. Volkswagen had built the capability in and made it invisible. The benchmark event for the T4 Syncro came in 1999. A team from Volkswagen Commercial Vehicles drove a T4 multivan Syncro from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego, the Pan-American highway, in its entirety, completing 22,880 kilometers in 15 days, 14 hours, and 6 minutes. The vehicle used was modified only with a larger fuel tank, roof-mounted spotlights, and protective lenses over the factory headlights. Everything else was production specification. The route included earthquake-damaged sections in Mexico and civil unrest in South America. The T4 Syncro completed it without significant mechanical failure. Guinness World Records recognized the achievement. Volkswagen used that run as the proof of concept for an entire line of increasingly capable transporter derivatives. The Pan-Americana models on T5, and eventually the T6 off-road series. The T4 Syncro was the vehicle that justified every subsequent VW van with four-wheel drive credentials. The T4 Syncro Caravelle and multivan variants combined genuine all-terrain capability with passenger accommodation for 7 or 8 people. Leather, privacy glass, captain's chairs, proper heating, permanent four-wheel drive underneath, usable every day, requiring no driver input to engage. A family vehicle that drove to work on Monday and crossed a mountain pass on Friday. The Syncro system asked nothing of the driver because it had already handled everything on its own. VW drove one from Alaska to the tip of South America in under 16 days. What van would you trust for that journey today? Number 3. Toyota Previa, 1990 to 1997. In 1990, Toyota's engineers looked at the minivan segment and made a decision that has never been repeated by any manufacturer before or since. They decided the engine should go under the floor, sideways, tilted 75 degrees from vertical, midship, between the axles, in a position that required Toyota to design a completely bespoke power plant because nothing in their existing catalog would physically fit the space. They called it the Previa, and that was only the beginning of the problem. The Previa's 2.4-litre four-cylinder engine is mounted under the front seats, inclined at 75 degrees from vertical, essentially horizontal, placed midship between the front and rear axles. Toyota designed this engine specifically for the Previa because nothing else would physically fit the space. No other engine in Toyota's catalog could be made to work in that location at that angle. Toyota built a bespoke power plant to achieve a particular weight distribution in a family van. The midship layout was chosen for the same reason mid-engine sports cars are built that way: optimal front-to-rear weight distribution, reduced yaw inertia, better handling. Applied to a minivan carrying 7 passengers and a week's worth of luggage, this was engineering that no one asked for, and no competitor was prepared to match. The four-wheel drive system used viscous couplings with full-time all-wheel drive. Toyota's all-track system distributed torque automatically. The Previa all-wheel drive handled winding mountain roads with a confidence that reviewers found genuinely surprising for a vehicle of its size and purpose. In 1994, Toyota added a supercharger. The supercharger in the Previa was not bolted to the top of the engine. There was no space for that. It was driven by a belt connected to the drive shaft, operating in the confined geometry of the mid-engine bay through a solution Toyota's engineers developed specifically for this vehicle. Output climbed to 161 horsepower and 201 pound-feet of torque. The supercharged all-wheel drive Previa was available from 1994 onward across both rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive configurations. A supercharged, mid-engine, all-wheel drive minivan. Toyota built this in 1994 and then discontinued it in 1997 in favor of a front-wheel drive, Camry-engined replacement that was more practical, cheaper to build, and infinitely less ambitious. The engineers who built the Previa went on to other projects. The Previa went on to become a cult object, a vehicle remembered more clearly now than it was celebrated at the time. The Previa remains one of the most over-engineered production vehicles of the 1990s, in any category. Toyota spent millions engineering a bespoke mid-engine supercharged all-wheel drive minivan, then replaced it with a front-wheel drive Camry. Was that the right decision? Number 2. Mitsubishi Delica Space Gear, L400, 1994 to 2007. In 1994, Mitsubishi sat down with what was arguably the best-selling four-wheel drive minivan ever built, the L300 Star Wagon, and decided it was not enough, so they called the Pajero engineering team. Launched in 1994, the L400 Space Gear moved away from the pure cab-over layout of the L300. The body adopted a semi-bonneted design, lower, wider, more aerodynamic, with a longer wheelbase and significantly more interior space. The visual change was substantial. The mechanical change was comprehensive. The four-wheel drive system in the Space Gear was the Super Select 2, the same system fitted to the second-generation Mitsubishi Pajero, the vehicle that had won the Dakar Rally outright. Super Select gave the Space Gear 4 operating modes: two-wheel drive for normal roads, full-time four-wheel drive, high for mixed terrain, four-wheel drive high with locked center differential for slippery surfaces, and four-wheel drive low with locked center differential for serious off-road use. Four-wheel drive high could be engaged at speed up to 100 km per hour without stopping. The same transfer case logic rally teams used to transition between road stages and special stages. The engine options matched the drivetrain ambition. The 2.8-litre 4M40 turbodiesel produced 140 horsepower and 232 pound-feet of torque, the same engine specified in the Mitsubishi Pajero for military and expedition use, and the same unit that carried rally teams across the Sahara. A 3.0-litre V6 petrol option, producing 185 horsepower, was also available. Ground clearance was factory specified at levels that challenged dedicated SUVs. The interior was the other half of the Overbuilt story. The Super Exceed trim came with captain's chairs that rotated 180 degrees, a crystal light panoramic roof, rear air conditioning, wood trim detailing, and a conversion to full sleeping platform in under a minute. Mitsubishi put Pajero hardware underneath a luxury lounge on wheels. The Space Gear was never officially sold in the United States. Canadian and European overlanders have been importing them since they cleared the 25-year rule. The best examples now trade at significant premiums. The 4 M40 diesel, properly maintained, is essentially indestructible. It shares architecture with multiple Pajero and commercial Mitsubishi platforms across 3 decades of production. An engine designed to cross the Sahara in a rally vehicle and carry 7 people in a luxury van has, in practice, proven to be one of the most durable diesel units Japan ever produced. The Space Gear earned its reputation one crossing at a time. The Space Gear has the same 4-wheel drive system as the Dakar-winning Pajero. Does that make it more impressive than the Delica at number 1 or less? Number 1. Mitsubishi Delica Star Wagon, 1986 to 1999. Everything on this list exists because of decisions made by engineers who refused to accept what a minivan was supposed to be. The Prairie rebuilt its entire chassis. The Previa designed a bespoke engine. The Chariot borrowed hardware from a rally car. The Space Gear took the Pajero's drivetrain and hid it under captain's chairs. All of it traces back to a van Mitsubishi, released in 1986. Not because anyone copied it, but because it proved the whole idea was possible. The Delica Star Wagon did not start a trend. It started a category. The Star Wagon launched in 1986 as the 3rd generation of the Delica nameplate, the first to be called Star Wagon, and the first to be built specifically for the recreational 4-wheel drive market, rather than commercial use. Mitsubishi took the platform that underpinned the 1st generation Pajero, adapted it for a forward control van body, and delivered a vehicle that was simultaneously the most practical family carrier in the Japanese domestic market and the most capable stock 4-wheel drive van ever offered for public sale. The 4-wheel drive system was part-time with 2-speed transfer case, high and low range, with automatic locking front hubs. The rear axle was solid. The front suspension independent with torsion bars. The 4D56 turbodiesel produced approximately 86 horsepower and 148 pound-feet of torque, enough to move the Star Wagon through terrain that stops most family vehicles entirely. The ground clearance was 190 mm stock. Optional limited slip rear differential on higher trim levels. Factory skid plates. The Chamonix and Super Exceed trim levels added crystal light roof panels, a panoramic skylight, 2nd row captain's chairs that swiveled and reclined, dual zone climate control, and the specific factory sticker that read, without irony, the special gear for 4x4 runners. The Star Wagon was never officially sold in the United States. The closest Mitsubishi came was a 2-wheel drive petrol-only version called simply the Mitsubishi van, with none of the hardware that made the Japanese market car worth discussing. North American buyers discovered what they had missed when the 25-year import rule made L300s legal, and demand has grown every year since. Coast to coast across Canada in winter, mountain tracks in New Zealand, desert crossings in Australia. The Star Wagon has been documented doing all of it in stock form, capable enough to go where drivers wanted, comfortable enough to live in while they did, and built well enough to keep going when modern vehicles stopped. That combination, capable, comfortable, and over-engineered relative to everything it competed with, is the definition of overbuilt. The Delica Star Wagon defined the category before the category had a name. The Star Wagon or the Space Gear? Which Delica is actually the better vehicle? Make your case in the comments. Every van on this list was discontinued. The manufacturers moved on, the buyers moved on, and the idea that a family vehicle should be genuinely capable off-road as a factory specification, not a marketing claim, disappeared from the segment entirely. The Star Wagon is still out there. So is the Space Gear, the Previa, the T4 Syncro. The industry just stopped building things like them. Star Wagon or Space Gear, pick one and defend it in the comments. That debate has been running for 30 years, and it is not settled. Subscribe for more on the vehicles that got left behind.